really struggling, having a lot of hot flashes, a lot of emotional dysregulation, gaining weight, right? So a lot of stuff is happening today that we haven't seen before. So it's not normal, it's just common, and we've normalized it because it's so common. Does that make sense? Part of the reason that I say this is that you're gonna be your best advocate at any point if you're going to a doctor or something like that. And so understanding that you have the right to look for an actual answer and to not be dismissed, okay? Especially when it comes to your body, especially when it comes to your hormones, and having somebody that's willing to like work with you and kind of dig a little bit deeper into like what's actually going on that you're not seeing the results that you want, or you're not feeling the way that you know you should be feeling, right? We should all feel like we have energy, like we feel comfortable and confident in our bodies. That's something that we should feel, and we shouldn't feel bad about seeking that out. So I just want to say that in terms of, don't let somebody else dismiss what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. What? Oh, thank you. All right, so when I say hormones, what are the hormones that you guys probably think of first? Estrogen. Yeah. Estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. Yeah. I would say that that's normally what pops into people's heads. So here are the other players, and it's gonna actually start in your brain. So, and it's not a hormone. Your pituitary, your hypothalamus pituitary is basically, if you draw a line right back here and go down, that's where your hypothalamus pituitary gland is. So it's two different glands in your brain, but they basically regulate everything. That is the part of your brain that sends messages to your adrenals. So your adrenals sit right on top of your kidneys, and that's where cortisol is made. We're gonna talk a lot about cortisol today. So that's one, it's called your HPA axis, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. So that's one axis that we have. And then you have your HPG, hypothalamus pituitary gonad, or HBO, hypothalamus pituitary ovarian, where your ovaries are. And so we'll talk a little bit about what is happening as we shift from menstruation to postmenopausal, of what system's taking over. So you have your thyroid. It's that little butterfly-shaped organ right here. Anybody know what thyroid is most commonly known for? So thyroid, most people know it as the thing that regulates your metabolism. And it's one aspect of it that it handles, which is always why people are struggling with weight or something like that. Often the thyroid is looked at first and foremost to see if there's an imbalance there. I will say by the time blood work shows a thyroid issue, it's been going on for a long time. And there's ways to support all of this just kind of naturally. So then you have your adrenals, your ovaries, and digestion and detoxification are two systems that play a very important role when we're talking about hormones and hormones balance. So if we are not digesting things properly, if we are having gut issues, we're gonna have hormone issues. If we're not detoxing properly, or if our detoxification system is overloaded, we're gonna have hormone imbalances as well. So this is why I approach things from that like holistic perspective of looking at the whole body and all the systems, because they all play with each other, right? exercise is a good stress on the body, but it is still a stressor on the body. So we just want to make sure that we're moving our body and, getting all the good benefits that exercise does, but also not overdoing it and balancing it with things like yoga or foam rolling or stretching and making the recovery as much a part of our workout routine as the spin and strength and everything like that. AKA, don't skip out on yoga. Toxins. This is where environment comes into play, and it's very overlooked. But this is a big one in terms of, how I said like 50 years ago, 100 years ago, we weren't seeing these issues. There's more chemicals, there's more toxins in our world today than we've kind of ever seen. And has anybody heard of the term endocrine disrupting hormones or endocrine disrupting chemicals? Yeah? Okay. These are toxins or chemicals that directly impact estrogen receptor sites and can either mimic estrogen in the body or block estrogen in the body. So probably the one that most people know is plastics. That's a big one. So if we could try to not do plastic water bottles or things like that, not store food in plastic, or definitely not heat food in plastic, but starting to look for that as well. And some of this is going to come by looking at personal care products, that's like makeup, shampoo, all that stuff, cleaning products, just kind of starting to like clean up your environment, because the less toxins our body has, the less our liver and our detoxification system has to work. So if we're overloading our detox system with toxins and shitty food and stress and even negative self-talk can be a toxin in the body, guess what? It's not going to have energy to detox your estrogen and your other hormones. So if we can take some of that load off, then our body has more energy to do the other stuff. You guys with me? Sluggish liver, that just plays into detoxification. So if the liver is overburdened, it's not going to detox as well. Part of this also leads into one of my favorite topics, which is if you're not pooping regularly, we're going to have some hormone issues, because pooping is part of your detoxification system. So we want to make sure that that is regular, and that's probably something that a lot of people struggle with. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you raise your hand for that one. But the goal is definitely 1 time a day. Like that's kind of minimum. Ideally 2 to 3. Okay, some people probably are like, oh, girlfriend, I'm like 3 times a week. Okay, something to focus on, something to work on. But we want to make sure that we are getting things out of the body and not having them just sit stagnant, especially in the colon. Okay. Insulin resistance is a big one, and so I'm just going to say it now. The 2 hormones I want you guys to pay most attention to, it's not estrogen. It's going to be cortisol, which is most famously known as the stress hormone, and insulin, which is what's going to manage and control blood sugar. So if we have a lot of stress and our cortisol is high, we're going to have problems. And if we have dysregulated blood sugar, then insulin is going to be dysregulated. And basically our hormones follow insulin. So if insulin is not balanced, if it's up and down and trying to figure out what the hell's going on, hormones are going to kind of follow suit. So I always think like going upstream. So in the hierarchy, have diagnosed Hashimoto's or Graves' disease, which is they're both autoimmune related thyroid issues, that's going to play a factor as well. All right. Any questions so far? It's a lot of information at first, you guys, I know. So, let's meet your hormones. I call them your superpowers because I think when we understand our hormones and we know what they do and we can balance them, they do become our superpowers. Like, women have higher estrogen levels than men for a reason because we do a lot of stuff men can't do. You know, pregnancy, childbirth, handling all the craziness of life. So if we can learn to like live synergistically with our hormones, it's a lot better than feeling like we're at war with our own body, right? Because I'm pretty sure at one time or another, or maybe even right now, you just feel like your body's working against you. Let's get you working with your body and understanding like what these hormones do and how they can actually benefit you. So, pregnenolone, it's actually my favorite hormone and nobody knows much about it, but it's the mama hormone. These are my terminologies for it, so don't go to your doctor and be like, the mama hormone. They'll be like, I've never heard of that. She makes all the other ones, right? So she's kind of, you know, you have your cortisol, your insulin up here, and then you have pregnenolone. And pregnenolone, if you ever looked at like a hormone chart, pregnenolone's here and then all the other ones are downstream from it. So she helps make all the other hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and cortisol. And pregnenolone relies on thyroid hormone for synthesis. That's why thyroid is such a big player in the hormone game. Progesterone, I call it the hippie hormone because it kind of helps you feel a little bit chill, calm, serene. So oftentimes people that struggle with like a lot of anxiety and even depression, sometimes it's actually that they have low progesterone happening. So progesterone is super important for fertility and pregnancy. Most of you guys probably know that one at least. You have to have high progesterone to hang on to a baby. Necessary for ovulation. So if you don't have enough progesterone, you are not going to ovulate. I know not everybody here is in the menstruation phase, but ovulation, if you guys have girls, I will say this is important. If you guys have young girls or teenage girls or whatever it is, ovulation is really, really important for bone density. So we actually want to be ovulating. So if you have daughters that go on birth control or anything like that, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind that you want to find a birth control that still allows them to ovulate. Because while I'm guilty, I was on birth control for a long time. I didn't like ovulate or have a period for 3 years, and I thought it was fantastic until I realized what I was actually doing to my body. So just a little side note, if you guys have girls, you know, make good choices. Helps you use fat for energy, builds strong bones. Again, ovulation helps with bone density, and is cancer protective. And then helps cells use thyroid hormone. So everything works together in the body, nothing is kind of off on its own. Oops. All right, now we get to estrogen. So menstruation, it builds the uterine lining. Estrogen is the thing that kind of gives you, like, makes you feel good, right? Like when you put on a cute outfit, your estrogen's in balance, you're like, yay, I'm killing it. That's what estrogen is doing, all right? It keeps your brain firing, which is why, So, oftentimes once we're post-menopause, side note, menopause is a day, just so you guys know. Menopause is not a phase, menopause is literally a day. So everything is perimenopause, and then it's post-menopause. Menopause is a day, and that day is 1 year from your last period. All right, once you hit that, that's menopause. Everything after is post. So what do a lot of people that are peri and post-menopause struggle with? Brain fog, fatigue, memory issues. It's a drop in estrogen. So we want to get that estrogen up. Estrogen and progesterone are going to be low post-menopause. That is normal. That is normal. But the not normal part is when it's so low that we're not functioning the way we're intended to. Affects every tissue in the body, brain, heart, bones, skin. Synthetic estrogen which just means that testosterone becomes estrogen. All right, so if we don't have testosterone, we don't get estrogen. That becomes even more important postmenopause as well, because we're still making testosterone even when we're peri and postmenopause. Testosterone doesn't take the same dip that estrogen and progesterone do. So we still want to make sure that we're making enough testosterone to still get that trickle into estrogen. So that's a big relationship we're going to talk about too. Helps with energy, strong bones, sharp mind, helps with confidence and sex drive. Estrogen and testosterone also have a lot of similarities because estrogen also helps with sex drive. Too much can bring about male traits. So if you have super high testosterone, you'll start to see like the facial hair or just kind of like oily skin or growth kind of in other places, or a lot of acne and hair loss. Right? Any questions so far on the different hormones? All right, let's talk about cortisol. So, known as the stress hormone, it helps to regulate blood sugar and blood pressure. So, throughout the night, cortisol is kind of at its lowest, and then when we wake up, we actually get a cortisol spike. It wakes us up in the morning. So we get a cortisol spike, we also get a blood sugar spike in the morning, because cortisol kind of comes on board, and then it releases glucose. It releases glycogen from our muscles to kind of give us this little jolt to help get us up and get us going. And then cortisol ideally is going to peak about 2 hours after you wake up, and then it'll slowly decline throughout the day until we get to nighttime, and it's going to be low again. So it's kind of this little like bell curve, if you will. Make sense? So it regulates immune response and inflammation. You need cortisol. The goal is not to have like super low cortisol. It's just that we want to have balanced cortisol. So cortisol, right, fight or flight. If there's a bear and you need to run from the bear, you want cortisol to come on board so you can get the heck out of there. We're not fighting bears anymore, right? We've kind of evolved a little bit from that. But what's happening now is traffic is the bear. Pickup line is the bear. Our kids are the bear. Our food, our environment is the bear. Our husbands are the bear. Our significant others, our family members are the bear, right? Everything has now become a stressor. And so it's just like all these things, our body is almost constantly in a fight or flight response. And we need to figure out how to calm that response down. So there's two folds to cortisol. One is people think, oh, I have a lot of stress, I must have high cortisol. Maybe, if it's an acute stress. So oftentimes if we're in an acute stress response, cortisol is going to be high. But what we're seeing more often than not now, and what I've seen a lot working with people and running these panels, so I literally can see black and white what's going on with cortisol levels, is that cortisol now is actually low. And that's the more dangerous place to be than having high cortisol. What it means is your body has been in this like stress response so long that it's starting to shut down cortisol production. Because cortisol is necessary, right? But it is what we call a catabolic hormone, which means that it breaks the body down, right? It's gonna break down your muscle to get the glycogen so that you can have blood sugar, so you can have energy to handle whatever the stress is. And so your body is always, 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 always gonna protect you. Like that is coded and will not change. So if you're constantly stressed, your body's gonna be like, we need to shut this system down. So it's gonna stop producing cortisol. And that's actually where you're gonna start facing things like adrenal fatigue, where you're tired all the time. Doesn't matter how much you sleep, you feel like you're dragging through every single day. Your emotions are all over the place. So that's why my cortisol is probably the most important hormone to start putting into check again. And it's why, I know if you've taken Gina's class or you've taken my class, oftentimes in yoga, we're talking to you about get into your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest nervous system, calm the body back down. Make your body And so if your body doesn't feel safe, it's gonna hold the weight because it's like, no, this is my safety, this is my shield. Physically and emotionally, it is a shield. So until our body feels safe, it's not gonna release it. So that's, again, holistic approach to weight loss or, health is it's not just about food and exercise, it's everything. The biggest thing is like right here. Now we're gonna switch gears into DHEA, which is like, I always think of DHEA as kind of the cleanup crew of cortisol. So cortisol, catabolic, breaking the body down. DHEA, anabolic, builds the body back up, all right? So these two we wanna have balance. If we have high cortisol and low DHEA, we're in danger because we're not gonna have the cleanup crew to clean up the wreckage of cortisol, all right? So we also wanna make sure that that's, high enough. It's the anti-aging hormone, so it reduces wrinkles, increases energy, improves memory, increases libido, helps to convert testosterone to estrogen, so again, important relationship there. Really important post-menopause when ovaries no longer produce estrogen, okay? And we're gonna talk a little bit more about where estrogen production comes from post-menopausal as well. All right, thyroid, mood, energy, metabolism. Good digestion is essential for thyroid production. So gut health is always so important to pay attention to. And then let's talk about insulin. I covered a lot of it already, but insulin controls blood sugar. And basically, where insulin goes, all the other hormones follow. Chronically elevated insulin can lead to more estrogen production. And again, more estrogen can lead to more fat storage. So that's why insulin resistance is oftentimes then accompanied with weight gain or being weight loss resistant. So big relationship there. And then insulin resistant is common with those with PCOS or polycystic ovary syndrome. Not gonna make anybody raise their hand, but a lot of women do struggle with PCOS. Once you're postmenopausal, it's not as much of a big deal, but if you guys have daughters or things like that, like just things to look out for. And something to note too is, I think what people oftentimes think is that if you're overweight, you become insulin resistant. But what's actually happening is that people are insulin resistant and then gaining weight. Kind of see that difference? So just kind of putting that out there, because I think a lot of times people are like, oh, well, just lose weight and you'll fix the problem. And it's like, not quite. Let's look at insulin and figure out how to rebalance insulin to take care of the weight stuff. Just a different way of approaching things. Okay, so let's talk about what imbalances look like. So too much estrogen, heavy and painful periods, fibroids, cysts on ovaries, so that leads into PCOS, breast tenderness, weight gain, especially in the hips and the waist, so kind of that midsection, irritability, mood swings, anxiety. Everybody's probably like, I have too much estrogen. And then too little estrogen, which again, most people experience a lot of this postmenopausal. Hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, foggy thinking, memory lapses, depression, sleep disturbances, and weight gain. So, kind of see what resonates most with you, and you can kind of see where that imbalance is coming from. Progesterone, so infertility, insomnia, anxiety, irregular cycles, lots of crying, breast tenderness, irritability. Again, hot flashes, vaginal dryness, foggy thinking, memory lapses, bone loss, incontinence, and heart palpitations. So you'll also notice that like too little progesterone and too little estrogen have similar symptoms associated with them. And I will say too little progesterone is probably the most common appearance. Most people don't have too much progesterone, but it would look like sleepiness, decreased libido, mild depression, and candida infections are more common with those with don't necessarily have to have cysts on your ovaries, which I've never understood, but you have to have like these three things. One of it is too much estrogen, insulin resistance, and cysts on the ovaries. So yeah. So again, if you guys have daughters, just something to have them ask their OBs about or things like that, or just to be aware, not to make them scared, but it's just the more we know, the more we can look out for. So let's talk about balancing hormones, right? That's kind of why you guys all showed up today. It's like, how do I actually balance these? You can probably saw where you feel the imbalance, right? You can be like, okay, I definitely have the low estrogen, low progesterone, probably low testosterone. Most of us here are probably feeling like on the lower end of a lot of these. So we're going to talk about how to bring a little bit more balance. And again, we're going to go upstream. We're going to go more of how can I manage insulin and cortisol. So, blood sugar. Blood sugar is the place to start. Insulin is, again, it's that primary hormone. I'm going to drive that home as much as I can. So we're looking for steady blood sugar. Blood sugar is going to be up and down. It's never going to be a flat line. You don't want it to be a flat line. What we're trying to do though is instead of these like peaks and valleys right here, we kind of want to just like smooth it out so it's a nice little wave. So that's what we're trying to do with blood sugar, because if blood sugar is doing this, ideally insulin will be doing this. And if you want to know what's going on with your insulin, ask your doctor to run an insulin panel. Blood glucose and insulin are not the same test, okay? Insulin testing you have to ask for. Blood glucose, honestly, every doctor runs that now. So if we can balance blood sugar, if we can balance insulin, we can start to balance the body, right? Because kind of hormones will all flow together. The other benefit is when we have stable blood sugar, we're also going to have stable energy. We've all felt the 3 o'clock crash, or we've all had like a big meal, and then an hour later we're like, it's nap time. And what happens is that you have this big rush of glucose, so you have this big release of insulin, and then you have this major dip at the end. So something to just kind of keep in mind. You guys were here a couple weeks ago when I talked about more balancing your meal plan, balancing your plate. This is kind of where that comes into play, which is if you're having carbohydrates, come on, Shannon. Just make sure you're having protein or fat with it, because that's going to help to stabilize that blood sugar spike a little bit. Or just like build around protein, add in your fiber, your veggies, add in your fat, and then your carbs. So just kind of try to have your meal center around something that isn't just the carbohydrate. So I always get the question of oatmeal. Oatmeal is great. It'll help keep you full, but just bring in protein and fat with it so that we're not getting a blood sugar spike. And in the morning, I would say focus more on protein and fat and some carbohydrates, but starting your day with protein and fat especially, so that we're not spiking blood sugar out the gate, is really important. Alright, so kind of touched upon this a little bit in that last slide. Our protein needs actually increase as we get older. We need more protein to maintain our muscle, and especially if you are trying to lose weight, we want to make sure that you're getting in enough protein so that you're losing body fat, not lean muscle, right? And that's why the in-body scan is so amazing, is that you can see what your weight loss or what your weight change is made up of. Because the number, right, your weight is just a number. We want to know, what is it made up of? Because maybe you go up 2 pounds. Well, is it water and inflammation? Is it muscle? Like, that's, adding muscle is great. So you don't need to worry about those 2 pounds if you just add 2 pounds of muscle, you know? So understanding what that number is made up of is so beneficial, because your weight could stay exactly the same and your body composition could change. And that's amazing. So who cares what the number actually is? Like, what's happening give your body time to not be eating, right? We now have access to food 24/7. We're very lucky, especially where we live right now. Like, we're not lacking food. But because it is so readily available and available all the time, kind of like this eating window that we have has expanded from like 6 or 7 a.m. until 10, 11 p.m. And so what I just kind of say is like, give yourself at least 12 hours. Basically, finish dinner at 7 or 8, and then don't have breakfast until 7 or 8. And you just fasted for 12 hours, which is great. It allows your body to move on and do other things. And that's kind of the same with like, have meals. Sit down and have meals. I was the #1 grazer for a long time. I would just snack throughout the day. But I never actually like stopped eating. So my body never like stopped digesting. It's the only process my body was doing all day long, right? So we kind of want to eat our meal and then give our body a couple hours so that your body can digest and then it can go do some other things, all right? And coming back to cortisol as well, try and sit down when you have your meals. Try to be present with your meals. I know that is hard when there's like 12 things going on around you, or you have little kids or big kids, or like on the go and here and there and everywhere. But as much as possible, when you're eating, eat. I'm going to come back to that parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic is that fight or flight. It's when cortisol is active. When we're in a fight or flight response, 2 main systems shut down. Anybody know what those systems are? Reproduction and digestion. Yes. So your reproductive system and your digestive system shut down when we're in a fight or flight response. Why? Because if you're going to run from the bear, your body's not worried about digesting food, and your body's like, danger, it's not safe, so it's not the time to bring a child into this world, so it shuts down your reproductive system. Remember, body is always looking out for you, right? It's always trying to keep you safe, so it's very primal in that. So if you're like, on a phone call or answering an email or watching TV or yelling at your kids, right? You're activated. And so your body's not going to be able to digest your food as well. And that's why your parasympathetic nervous system is your rest and digest, is you're calm. Your body can actually digest the food, and you can use all of that good food that you're putting in your body and actually utilize it. So as much as possible, try and sit down and actually eat your food. And eat enough. I will say it all day. I will say it until I'm blue in the face. Eat enough food. Because the other thing that's going to happen is if you are not eating enough, that's a huge stress to the body. And what's going to happen is your body is going to be like, okay, I'm not getting enough energy, so now I need to conserve the energy that I am using to, fit with what I'm being given. So it's called, why am I blanking? Metabolic adaptation is what it's called. So if you reduce your calories too much, your body's going to reduce its energy needs to meet it, so you're not going to see the results that you want. And we're also just stressing the body that way. So we want to give our body enough food, enough fuel, so that it can do all the things that it does. Sound good? Okay. So don't always believe my fitness pal. All right, one of my favorite things, sunlight and sleep. I would say if your sleep is not good, that's where your energy should be focused. Sleep is so important. So it's the theme of our week this week for University was about sleep. So I'm going to go into Chinese medicine real quick for you. So our body does its repairing when we sleep, right? So you come in here, we work your muscles. We're doing that kind of catabolic work when we're in here, right? We're breaking your muscles down. That's what we want to do in here. We want to break the muscles down so that they can rebuild and come back stronger. But where does that rebuilding come? At night, when you're sleeping. So if we're not getting that sleep, the body's not going to be able to repair. It's not going to be between 10 and 2 a.m. Between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. is when your body does more of its psychological repair. And I was talking to a member earlier today about something called the lymphatic system. Anybody know the lymphatic? Who knows their lymphatic system? Yeah, okay. So anybody get a sore throat? And you're like, oh my gosh, your lymph is inflamed, right? So your lymphatic system is your body's waste system, basically. It kind of takes things and hopefully filters them out of the body, but it's your body's sewer system, essentially. Your cardiovascular system has a pump, it's called your heart. Your lymphatic system doesn't. There is no pump for your lymphatic system, so movement is probably the best way to move your lymphatic system, or dry brushing or something like that. But we have a lymphatic system, which is actually your brain's lymphatic system. So your brain needs to drain as well. We need to detox the brain. And that happens at night as well. So that's happening between 2 and 6 a.m. So most people think, oh, I need to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. True. But when you sleep is actually really important too. That's why people that do swing shifts and stuff like that are really dysregulated, because we're governed by the circadian rhythm. Our circadian rhythm is not governed by our watch, right? It's governed by the moon. And so we need to, when the sun goes down, we need to go to bed. When the sun comes up, we need to wake up. So most people know melatonin. What does melatonin help you do? Sleep. Okay? So I did my little cortisol bell curve for you, right? So melatonin is like the flip of that, right? Melatonin is super low all day long, and then at night melatonin increases so that you can go to bed, and it drops down in the morning. Melatonin production is started when light changes. So when it's bright and sunny outside, or when we're in a brightly lit room, or when we have a screen in front of us, melatonin production isn't going to happen because our brain's not getting that signal. Once it's dark and we're no longer, getting exposure to sunlight, then melatonin production kicks on. So this is where, not having screens on at night, stuff like that. But one of the biggest tricks to a good night's sleep starts in the morning, and it's going outside, and it's getting without sunglasses on, or without even glasses on, just letting your eyes be exposed to sunlight, because sun comes in through your pupil and hits your pituitary gland, and your pituitary gland is one of the things that starts to create melatonin as well. So I always say a good night's sleep actually starts in the morning. So try to get outside, exposing your eyes and your body to sunlight first thing in the morning, even if it's raining, even if it's cloudy, helps to set that circadian rhythm too. So if you're able to get outside within about 30 minutes of waking up, that would be ideal. For how long? 10 minutes, yeah. Take the dog out, go for a little walk, water your garden, I don't know, walk around, go barefoot, do some grounding. And one thing to note too is if you're somebody that has a lot of sensitivity to sunlight, it is a signal that your liver and your detox system might be impacted too. So my husband has like the hardest time. He cannot go anywhere without sunglasses. And I tell him all the time, I'm like, you got liver issues. He's like, no, I don't. I'm like, yeah, you do. So just a note on that if you're somebody that always has to have sunglasses on. Exercise. All right, weightlifting is essential, especially postmenopausal. We need to lift weights to help keep our bones strong. Weightlifting is, again, there's a difference between being uncomfortable and being challenged and it being too much, okay? So just, you're not gonna get bulky, okay? I promise you, Gina promises you, she's been doing this longer than I have, you're not gonna get bulky by picking up heavier weights, okay? If anything, you're probably gonna lean out because the more lean muscle we have, the higher our basal metabolic rate, the more calories we need on a daily basis. And we need to put the stress on the muscle because the stress on the muscle helps the bones stay strong, all right? And it's so important for us to do that. As well as exercise is one of the best ways to help increase testosterone production. And kind of as I talked about earlier, we need testosterone to make the estrogen. And especially once our ovaries are shut down and not working anymore, we need all the help we can get with that production. So coming in and working out and having that good stress is a great way to increase testosterone to naturally increase that estrogen level. And yeah, so low testosterone inhibits lean muscle mass. So a lot of men that struggle with low testosterone will also struggle with putting on muscle mass. Oh good, I already talked about picking up the heavier set of weights. So we're all gonna come in tomorrow, right? And pick up something a little heavier. So your gut, I talked about, right? Digestion, making sure that your gut's on track. So if you struggle with GI issues, constipation, gas, acid reflux, all of that stuff, definitely something to take a look at and start, putting some work into that. But gut health, again, is imperative to hormone health. And it's all gonna come back to stress, right? It's all gonna lead back to your stress response because if you're not digesting properly and you're not absorbing the nutrients, again, we're stressing the body. Or if you have like leaky gut and you're having things get into your body that aren't supposed to be there, your body's gonna mount an immune response, and that again is a stress to the body. So bone broth, collagen, prebiotics, probiotics, all of that stuff can just help kind of give your gut a little bit of a boost. Chewing your food, again, sit down, eat your food, be present, try and chew your food. So digestion starts in the mouth. So we have what's known as mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. Mechanical digestion is the actual mechanics of chewing your food because your salivary glands start the digestive process by releasing amylase, which helps to break down carbohydrates. So the more you chew your food, once it hits your stomach then has less work to do when things are in smaller pieces. So my best example is like, take a piece of steak, right? If you cut off a piece of steak and you chew it twice and then swallow, you're now asking your body to basically digest that piece of steak. Whereas if you take the time to chew and mash it up a little bit more, then your body's like, oh, this is a lot easier than to fully digest a piece of steak, all right? So chew that food. Digestive enzymes and bitters can help. And then sometimes too, if you wake up in the morning, getting warm water in your system can kind of slowly wake up your digestive system as well. Any questions so far? Is it a lot of information? Is it making sense? Yeah, that's great. Okay. Here we go. Detoxification. So I'm going to go to kind of that second point real quick about estrogen detoxification. Because this is the biggie of why detoxification is so important when we're talking about hormones, especially and estrogen. So we have 3 different estrogen detoxification pathways. So 2-OH stands for 2-hydroxy, 4-hydroxy, and 16-hydroxy estrogen. 2-hydroxy, 2-OH, is the safest path for estrogen to be detoxified in the body. Again, the only way you would know anything about what's going on with these pathways is to do a hormone panel. But the heavy hitter is that the 16-hydroxy pathway is a dangerous pathway And then making sure that you're having regular bowel movements is really important as well to just keep that stuff moving. So, to support detoxification, again, our liver does a lot of the work, and if we can unburden the liver with some of these other things, then it can do its normal detoxification more efficiently and effectively. So food, when it comes to food, you don't have to buy all organic, but buy organic when you can, especially there's a list out, it's the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. Dirty Dozen are those foods that you do want to buy organic, things like strawberries, raspberries, peaches, apples. You can just Google it, it comes out every year. And then the Clean 15 are those produce that, avocados are almost always on that one, bananas. I always think if it has a skin, it normally you can buy regular, but you can save your money there. But we just want to make sure we're not like introducing a lot of hormones, chemicals, things like that through our food. So if you're able to buy, quality proteins, this is kind of where you want to spend your money. Stress, seeing a pattern here. We want to reduce our stress. And stress comes in all different forms. So I think, yes, work, family can be stressors, environment, but also again, like the cleaning products, the personal care products can be stressors. And the big one that I don't think enough people pay attention to is that our thoughts can be stressors. So your body hears everything that the mind thinks. So if you're constantly beating yourself up, if you're constantly, criticizing yourself or telling yourself you're not good enough, or why didn't you do this, or you should have done this better, your body internalizes all of that. So it's really like that mindset shift of starting to talk to yourself in a more positive way, in a more affirmative way. And when I first started dealing with like affirmations, I thought it was kind of like they just didn't resonate, right? Like they just seemed they didn't like sink in with me. And what I've come to realize is make your affirmation feel true to you. Don't make it like outlandish where you're like, that's so weird, but I'll say it. Like people will post affirmations on Instagram and you're like, that sounds great, but it doesn't resonate. Find affirmations that resonate with you and like feel true to you. Or just state things as if they've already happened or they're happening right now, And then if you can start to clean up what you're using on your body, in your home. If you need like recommendations for that stuff, you definitely can talk to you guys about that. So,
What was that, Shannon? Sorry, I missed the second part.
oh, I went over that first. It was the estrogen detox pathways.
Oh.
So biggest takeaway is to start really addressing stress more than anything else. I think it's one of the things that is just causing a lot of issues for people because the more stress we have, the more dysregulation there's going to be downstream. So it's a big topic, it's a broad topic. There's a lot to reducing stress. It's definitely a journey that all of us are probably on, but it makes a big difference. We cannot keep living in this fight or flight response. We've got to pull out of it. Even if it's just like the little moments when you're laying on the yoga mat and you finally have 10 minutes for yourself where you can just like calm your brain down. That's like why we have it here. Doing things that feed your soul, that fill your cup. I saw a great video where, we've all heard the expression like don't pour from an empty cup, or don't pour from a half full cup. And I saw this thing that was like, don't pour from your cup at all. start eating in a way that just is a little bit more balanced, you know? If you can get cortisol and insulin more regulated, I promise you, you'll feel a hell of a lot better. Any questions?
This is kind of a dumb question, but so
No dumb questions.
once you're postmenopausal, I've heard some say, oh, you're only postmenopausal for 5 to 10 years and your body balances out and you're fine. But you're really postmenopausal
You're
forever,
always
right?
postmenopausal.
So you're,
Yeah, thank you. I can't believe I forgot to say this. So, postmenopausal, right? Ovaries are closed. They're no longer open for business. Your adrenals are what start to make your estrogen, which is why the connection between estrogen and cortisol is so important. Because if your adrenals are spending all their time making cortisol because you're constantly stressed out, it will not have the energy to make estrogen. Thank you. I can't believe I forgot. That's like, duh. It's like the neon sign of what I was supposed to say to you guys tonight. But you know, it's your adrenals that are taking over post-menopause. So if you're constantly stressed, they're not going to be doing their job. And this is something where it's not once you hit perimenopause that you should start paying attention to, like where your cortisol level is at. This is like teenagers should start paying attention to this and getting it under control, getting it managed, because it's never too early to start thinking about that transition, right? And it's never too late to start paying attention to it either. Stress is at, I think, the epicenter of almost any like chronic issue or disease or imbalance or whatever you want to say. But especially for women, it's the adrenals that are going to make your estrogen. And if they're too busy making cortisol, they're not going to make your estrogen and progesterone, and you're going to feel like shit. And nobody wants to do that. So get it under control.
So once you determine someone's hormones are not in balance, what do you recommend? Do you recommend supplements? Do you recommend probiotics, prebiotics, hormone replacement? Is it specific to the individual?
I mean, it's definitely specific to the individual, and it's one of those things where like a lot more information is going to need to be gathered to figure out kind of your personal roadmap, right, or your personal plan. But I think that's where, starting with the foundations of getting stress a little bit more under control, getting sleep under control, and then making sure that you're eating in a way that's stabilizing blood sugar better. It's like starting there, I think is a blanket statement to everybody. Everybody can do that. Definitely I think gut support is important for most people. Most people have gut issues going on or aren't digesting food properly. And then making sure you're detoxing and having regular bowel movements. When I work with people, I probably ask about how their bowel movements are within 5 minutes. Anything else?
You talked before about like what your body can handle during your menstrual cycle as far as like working out and how demands go up and down.
Yes.
Can you review that?
Yeah. So menstruation rate is roughly 28 days, anything from 26 to 32-ish days. So the beginning of, so when we're bleeding, right, during our actual period, estrogen and progesterone are at their lowest. So we don't have the same energy, right? We naturally don't have the same energy. So still, work out, come to class, but you might realize like maybe that is when you kind of drop down a little bit, or you don't kind of challenge yourself as much. You don't go max out. And then kind of as you get into like day 6, 7, 8, estrogen's starting to come back up. So you'll start to feel like you have a little bit more energy. You can push yourself a little bit further. Midway is ideally when you ovulate. Sorry. And ovulation is when you can like hit a PR. So ovulation is, I think, just this like magical time. Most people pay attention to the period, but ovulation is this just like great time of the month, right? Your estrogen is high, your estrogen's peaking, progesterone's about to come into play. Your sex drive normally is higher. It's, again, body is smart. It's your sex drive is higher because it's understanding like now's the time to procreate. So let your husband know so that he can be on that. So that's when you would like want to try and go PR on the bike or grab the heavier set of weights or challenge yourself in a new way. And then second half of your cycle, progesterone spikes right after ovulation. Estrogen starts to come down and progesterone stays high a little bit longer. So you'll feel a little bit of an energy shift. Your energy will start dipping a little bit. And also, because progesterone is that hippie hormone, so that relaxation, that's actually when you might feel yourself being a little bit more flexible. So maybe that's when you push yourself a little bit in like yoga and kind of maybe go for holding a position a little bit longer or trying the balance a little bit more. Does that help? Yeah.
So if you are perimenopausal and you haven't had your period for like 6 months or 9 months, then you get those, and then you get it again, so you're not like in menopause yet. Those 6 or 9 months, are your progesterone estrogen levels, like, are they still kind of fluctuating throughout that time, or?
Generally, they're honestly like all over the place. Like,
But there's no rhythm to it, it's just, right? Yeah. Okay.
yeah. And also keep in mind too, is once you have that period, that clock resets.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to nail down what it, you would have to kind of like almost test your hormones
Yeah.
like consistently to see what's going on, because sometimes they're high, sometimes they're low. Progesterone generally starts to drop off first, so you kind of stop ovulating first, and then estrogen kind of is trying to figure out what the hell it wants to do. Yeah. It's here, there, and everywhere. Yeah.
What's a good way to get tested for the cortisol and insulin and like where your body is, and you do it like a lot of times so you can see how it's up and
No,
down?
so the one that I do, it's 24 hours. So you test 4 times, so you can get a snapshot, a 24-hour snapshot of what your cortisol is doing. You get cortisol, you get DHEA. You can also get estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. The one I do also looks at melatonin, and you can actually see if your body is in this like chronic fight or flight response or an acute fight or flight response.
Is it saliva or urine or?
This is urine. And so saliva is another way to do it, but urine can actually show you what's called metabolites. So it can show how things are actually moving through the system. So I run a panel that actually shows you how estrogen is moving through those 3 pathways that I talked about. So you get a really good understanding of what's going on there. You could ask your doctor. You can ask your doctor to see if they'll run it. And then
Yeah.
most don't. Yeah, most don't run a proper thyroid panel, let's be honest. If you really want to know. Western medicine, you guys, is amazing, especially if you're in a car accident or something horrible happens, and be grateful it is there, okay? Love it. My dad's a surgeon, okay? So grew up around it. But they're not going to take in the totality of the person and really like dig deep to figure it out. Some will, but not a lot. And then most functional medicine doctors or functional practitioners would be able to run something like that. But you can also ask me.
So you have a means to that. Okay.
Just one other question for
Yeah.
follow-up, because you did say that estrogen is found in the fat cells. So when doing the force spot, what is the, do you feel like you get an accurate view of the estrogen levels, or is it now based on just how you're feeling?